All right, let's get some. There we go. There we go. All right, you see it. There we go. There you go. The lighting has to adjust. There you go. If you come to Washington, D.C., it's going to be a bridge where the Washington National Baseball Team stadium is. And it's going to be a bridge that you're going to see in your immediate adjacent. That's the Frederick Douglass Bridge. That Frederick Douglass himself walked that bridge from Anacostia every day when he worked at the Capitol under the leadership and the presidency of Abraham Lincoln in the 1800s. So, yeah, historical bridge. And it's going to be a church that sits on the corner by the 7-Eleven. That is St. Vincent de Paul. That's my family church that I grew up in. And so it's history all around DC. So just to put them facts out there first. Um, I'm talking about the Honorable Frederick Douglass because it's a movie being made about him that's going to be aired in Scotland. A Scotland filmmaker is making a movie about Frederick Douglass and him escaping from Maryland to Scotland. Now, how did that happen? How somebody, a slave, flee and go on the run from a slavery situation and get themselves to Scotland? Now, there's something in the history books that I didn't know. And I wasn't taught this. So I'm listening to this documentary on the BBC World News, and they have all kind of historians on there. So really, if you're into history, that's a perfect channel to listen to on Sirius SM. And they got a lot of history, world history, not just American history, but world history. So Frederick Douglass fled to Scotland where he was underground and began his oracle career where he wrote like books that became popular, and the wealthy families of Scotland, which were Caucasian, that were liberate that were liberated and was for equality and justice of all mankind. And they were individuals that were in and out of the US from the North. A lot of the slaves left the South to run north because the North is what and who defeated the South in the Civil War. And so the North will be the destination that you will find freedom, that you will find help where the white culture was not enslaving up north. They were trying to treat people with equality and treating people, black people of color, dignified. So the North was the savior of whoever that could get out of the South. But I was fascinated to hear that Frederick Douglass made it to Scotland. And because of the books he wrote that got around. So basically, think of the rap game nowadays, and the underground artists making their music is only heard in the streets, which is underground. That's what we equivalent. That's equivalent to the streets. That is considered the streets. Underground. It's not mainstream. It's not on a label. It's not on a label radar. So he was writing books and writing manuals underground. So therefore, the liberators of the white culture that were allies of freeing slaves, they embraced Frederick Douglass. And a particular family came back to America and paid for Frederick Douglass' freedom. So that's how he was able to come back to the U.S. and start his career as a social reformer, abolitionist, an orator, a writer, and a statesman. Leading the abolition movement in Massachusetts and New York and becoming famous for his incisive anti-slavery political views and activism. So that was fascinating to me that this man made it to Scotland, of course, with the help. I'm curious, who was it that got him to Scotland? I'm sure he didn't do it by himself, but that was very fascinating to me. So when this book is released, I recommend you getting this book. And you could go on the BBC World News and I guess log in Frederick Douglass finding refuge in Scotland, and the author of the book is going to come up and so forth. I'm sorry I don't have the name of the filmmaker and the writer of the book, but that film is not going to be released in the US. It's going to be released in Scotland. And, I just thought that was fascinating. Anytime that the BBC World News give any history or any information on anybody that is of the Black culture, that's a big deal. They just honored Josephine Baker with an honor over in France. They talked about her recently, and I did a piece on her because her son is writing a book. Josephine Baker had 12 adopted kids, and one of her sons is writing a book, and he runs her restaurant that she later started in New York, Chez Josephine. So if you're in New York and you like French cuisine, that's the place to go. And get lost in vintage history of the 1920s of Josephine Baker. So I just thought this was fascinating that I didn't even know about Frederick Douglass. I knew he created the North Star paper and He was an ally of freeing the slaves with, um, he worked with Harriet Tubman and other freedom fighters and, to free the slaves and whatnot. But he was born in Talbot County, Maryland. Never heard of that place. And his place of burial is Rochester, New York. And he died in Washington, D.C., February 20, 1895. And, you know, it was just, wow. That was just interesting to hear, because I never heard that, you know. So I just thought I'd just put that out there because they're talking about him on the world news because of this film being made and the book that has been written, but it's only in Scotland. So if you're not listening to world news, you're not going to hear this information. So, all right, let's expand our horizon and not only learn about what's going on in our backyard, but let's get outside of the U.S. and try to be um, let's try to be world efficient on information and news so we could just be in the loop, because about time our American channels start reporting on something foreign, we already up on it for whatever reasons. It's just good to be in the know and not the last to know. All right, I got one more for y'all, and I'm going to call it a night. Big Dave. Big Dave, Street's Finest, bringing you social issues tonight and social icons of the culture. I hope you love the content that I'm bringing and my delivery and my perspective. Street's Finest. Stay tuned.